What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel and thank you for tuning in for another episode. I know it's been quite some time since I posted another video and I apologize for that. I just want you guys to know that I'm still here. I'm still willing to make content. I've just had a lot going on in my personal life that I really needed to get on track with. I've actually lost somewhere near about 30 pounds as of right now, so I'm feeling pretty good with that. And then I also just had some other, personal related issues that I needed to focus on. And so I took a little bit of time away from videos to really focus on myself and my health and just make sure that I am doing well. So with that being said, today's video is going to be about my 5 likes and my 5 dislikes about my 2017 Honda Rebel 500. And make sure you stay tuned to the end of the video because I actually have another announcement for the channel. So I've been debating in my head which way I wanted to start with this. Do I want to tell you guys my dislikes first? Do I want to tell you guys my likes first? I don't want this video to seem like, it leans towards one end or the other. And most of my dislikes with this bike can be fixed. These are, some of these things are fixable issues that you could do with some modifications or so on and so forth. But I had to really dig deep. And I want to let you guys know that I had to dig deep to find 5 things that I disliked about this motorcycle. So without further ado, I'm gonna start with my dislikes because I wanna end this video on a positive note about the Honda Rebel 500. So for you guys who don't know, my particular Honda Rebel 500 is a 2017 model. So this is like the first of the newest kind of generation of Rebels. The 2020 and up models actually come standard with LED lighting. My bike did not have that. I did some modifications to my headlight to get LED lighting and so forth. I did a bunch of modifications that you guys can check out in previous videos if you want to check them out. I do advise you check out the videos and see if these are some modifications that you would like to do to your Rebel as well. So my first dislike about the Honda Rebel 500 is going to have to be the stock seat. A lot of people complain about the stock seat. It's way too hard for long distance riding. I mean, honestly, the longest ride I ever went out on continuously with my Honda Rebel 500 was about 72 miles. And I'm gonna say that on the way out to where we were going, it only took maybe 45 minutes for me to really get tired of that stock seat. I mean, my butt was going numb. I could feel it in my legs, just traveling down to your legs. And I was dying for a break from that seat after only 45 minutes. So if you're planning on going any long distance with this motorcycle, you're definitely gonna wanna upgrade your stock seat. There's multiple options out there. I would stay away from the Taiwanese branded stuff. They're probably not gonna be as comfortable as like the American or other, maybe higher end name stuff out there. You've got seats that can be made by Corbin. You can customize a lot of these things when you order them too directly from the company. And then you also have like the Mustang Tripper seat, which I've heard really good things about. It really all depends on the style and the approach that you want to go for, but I would highly recommend upgrading your seat if you plan on doing anything greater than, I would say, 45 minutes to an hour maximum on this motorcycle in one sitting. So the next dislike that I'm going to go over, this isn't something that you can necessarily fix unless you wanted to spend money on a nice set of, like, say, forward controls. But my second dislike about this motorcycle is going to be that it's a little bit cramped for taller riders. Now, I'm approximately 6 foot tall, and I probably get another ½ inch when I have my boots on. With the mid controls, it is a little bit cramped. My knees are a little bit, high, and I would say it kind of goes in line with the stock seat. It's not something you notice on short rides, but over long distances, your knees and your legs are going to start to feel a little bit cramped, and this is also going to depend on, if you're a taller rider, how long are your legs? Do you have a longer torso or do you have longer legs? So your inseam and all that stuff is really going to matter when it comes to this. I would not shy away from this bike still though if you're about 6 feet tall. I think once you start getting over that 6 foot mark though, 6'1", 6'2", you're gonna want to look towards something else. Even if that means looking at something like the Rebel 1100. I have not sat on one personally myself, so I cannot tell you how much ergonomically different the two bikes are, but the Rebel 1100 should be just a little bit more spacious than the Rebel 500 and the Rebel 300. My third dislike about this motorcycle is actually going to be the fuel capacity. Now, this tank only holds approximately like 2.9 gallons of gas. Now, on the good news, something I'm going to go over in my likes, the bike does get really awesome fuel economy. So with a 2.9 gallon tank, I was averaging somewhere around 60 miles per gallon, and I could easily make about 130 to 140 miles on a tank before the reserve light would start to flash. which is relatively, you know, a good range, but I feel like if this bike had at least a 3.5 gallon tank or a 3.7 gallon tank, the range on this bike could have been so much better. So my fourth issue with this bike is going to be something that can be fixed, but it's going to cost you quite a bit of money, and that's going to be the stock suspension. I'm a heavier guy, you know, right now I actually weigh around 222 pounds. Before I weighed about 252 pounds when I first got my Rebel 500. So I'm about 30 pounds down now. But even then, if you're, you know, somewhere above the, I'm gonna say like 190 over 200 pound club, the stock suspension is gonna be kind of limited by your weight. The stock suspension is really soft. You do have some preload adjustability in the rear. You have 5 settings that you can play with. I usually kept mine on about the 4th setting, being a heavier guy. I almost wanted to kind of mimic the fact that I had either a load or a passenger on the back, and it seemed to help, but the front end is comically springy. When you come to a stop, you're gonna sit there and kind of pogo as you come to a halt. It's rather comical how springy it is. So the stock suspension is really soft. It does affect the handling just a little bit. It can kind of make you feel like you're wallowing in corners here and there. And so if you want a bike that feels really solid and you want a Rebel 500, you're gonna have to look into some pricey upgrades as far as the suspension goes. And there are options out there from companies like Öhlins, and I wanna say Two Brothers Racing as well. So my last and final dislike with this bike, and this is something that people have pointed out in my videos countless times, and I promise you it's not something I ever did on purpose, but it's going to have to be the turn signal switch. The turn signal switch on this bike in particular is super vague. And what I mean by that is that you can feel yourself pushing it left and right, but when you go to cancel it and you have to give it that push in, it's hard to feel, especially when you have gloves on, you know, any kind of thick gloves, if it's wintertime, or even just my regular summer gloves. I cannot feel the thing click in. And there's no real positive click in it either. It's very spongy, it's very mushy. And I'm not sure if that was something that was just kind of like my bike and the wear and tear that goes along with it. I've played with some other bikes on the showroom floor of the dealerships that I visited, and they all feel relatively spongy to me. So a lot of you guys would point out like, oh, you know, I see the flash show on your dash, you left your turn signal on, that's dangerous, blah, blah, blah. I promise you, it's not something I ever particularly did on purpose. It's just that that switch is so vague that you can't tell that you've actually turned it off without looking at the dash and seeing that you've turned it off. And most of the time, I'm not staring at my dash, especially when I'm making a video. I'm usually focused on the road ahead of me and I'm looking out for dangers while I'm talking to you guys through the camera. So having that positive feedback in that switch, it means a lot. And unfortunately, the Rebel 500 switch is a little vague. All right, so we're done with my dislikes. We're gonna go into my likes now. And the first one we're gonna start off with is the engine. And in particular with the engine, I wanna talk about its power delivery. Now, being a 500 parallel twin, this bike actually doesn't make a whole lot of horsepower. It only makes right around 42 to 45 horsepower, but it makes also just over 30 foot-pounds of torque. Now in its category, this bike competes with a lot of things like the Ninja 400 or the Z400 platform when it comes to the motor, the Duke 390, bikes of those kind of ranges. And then you also have its other sibling motorcycles that use the same motor, the CB500F, the CBR 500R, and so on. Now I've pointed this out in a previous video of mine. Honestly, from a perspective of a cruiser bike, I feel like it's a pretty good motor. It has plenty of off-the-line torque. It has very great mid-range. It does lack up high, and that's the reason why I've pointed out in my previous video, I don't see that motor performing all that well in bikes like the CB500F or the CBR 500R, because those are more sport-oriented motorcycles, and I feel like they deserve a more exciting engine. Whereas this engine gives great punch off the line and a great mid-range, which makes it a great cruiser bike, but I don't think that this motor belongs in those platforms. But with that being said, my favorite thing about this motor by far is the torque for its size and its category. It does great. It makes the flattest and broadest torque you could hope for in a bike of this size. It is fantastic. Now the next thing that I'm going to talk about, my second favorite thing about this motorcycle, is going to be the miles per gallon. And we touched on that briefly as we went over the fuel tank size about my dislikes. But like I said, on a positive note, this bike gets incredible fuel economy. Now in the past, I've owned a Ninja 300, I've owned the Duke 390, so I've had bikes of smaller displacement, and I've actually owned, Ninja 250s and stuff back in the day. I never really tracked the fuel mileage on those bikes. I was more learning and just trying to have fun. But these days, I like to track my fuel mileage here and there, just kind of see how the bike is doing. This bike, for being the biggest motor in the small bike category that I've had in recent years, has gotten the best fuel economy. And I don't know if that's because you can short shift it so greatly because of the amount of torque it makes and the amount of torque it makes so soon in the rev range, or what. So at a steady 80 miles per hour, my Rebel 500 gets about 60 to 61 miles per gallon pretty consistently, and it's very impressive. Now with my Duke 390, that motorcycle got about 55 miles per gallon. It's not a huge deal, it's only a 5 mile per gallon difference, but when you think about it, in a fuel tank of about 3 gallons that they each have, that's an extra 15 miles that you have to play with. That could be the make or break between making it to the next fuel station or not if you're out on a nice adventure. So I have nothing but good things to say about the miles per gallon that this engine produces. Absolutely phenomenal. Honda did a great job tuning this bike to be fuel efficient and also a little bit fun. The next thing that I like about this bike, and it's gonna be kind of contradictory to what I said about the suspension, but the handling. The handling is actually pretty good. The bike is very flickable from side to side despite having fat tires in the rear and also up front. You would think with a 130 front tire that this bike wouldn't want to flick into corners all that well, but it actually surprisingly does. Now the bike can seem to be a little wallowy in the corners, especially if you take them with too much speed because of the stock suspension, but other than that, the bike feels relatively planted and overall the ride is very comfortable. The only negative downside to the handling is just that little bit of wallowiness that you get in the turns. So my fourth like about this motorcycle is going to be the styling. I mean, that's something I went over in previous videos multiple times as I've modified it. When I first got it, I think the bike is absolutely beautiful. And I just absolutely love what you can do with these things to make them even more beautiful. And there's not a whole lot that I can go on with the styling, so that's gonna bring me to my fifth thing. It's the modability. What you can do with these bikes is almost limitless. I mean, you wanna throw a fairing on it, there's tons of selections out there. You wanna put a sissy bar on it, tons of selections out there. Seats, handlebars, headlights. I mean, you can do almost anything you want to with these bikes. There's plenty of crash protection type parts out there if you want to put like a cage on it, or if you want to put just regular frame sliders on it. There's so many things that you can do with this bike. There's body panels out there, quarter fairings, belly pans. I mean, you can do anything with this motorcycle. Just look up a lot of the things that the people in Thailand and those companies that produce these parts have done. They make some really beautiful looking bikes out of this Rebel 500, almost to the point where they're unrecognizable as a Rebel 500. It's pretty incredible. All right, so that's gonna do it for everything I wanted to go over as far as what I disliked and what I liked about the Rebel 500. Now, if you've made it to the end of the video, thank you for staying tuned. I'm gonna go ahead and make an announcement. Now, it's with a very heavy heart that I make this announcement. This was not an easy decision to make by far. I'm telling you guys, I did not rush into this whatsoever. I took my time, but the Rebel 500 is gone. I actually sold the motorcycle to a dealership who made me a really nice offer, especially in the day and age that we're going through right now. And I decided to jump on it because I found a bike in the market that had piqued my interest just to the fullest, and I really wanted to get my hands on it. Now this bike is gonna become the star of this channel here very soon. I'm gonna wait till the next video to reveal the bike to you guys. And if you already know what it is, because I've kind of posted it on a couple of pages out there, please keep that to yourself. Leave the comment section for the people who don't really know what it's about. If you wanna make comments about anything else, that's fine, but please kind of leave the surprise to me if you could. I would really appreciate that. The only hint that I'm gonna give you guys is that this bike is an absolute beast. So if you wanna go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section about what you think this next bike is on the channel, go ahead and do that. And if you're right, maybe I'll let you know. So as always, thank you for tuning in, guys. I really appreciate you guys who are hitting that sub button. I appreciate everybody who stuck around. I hope you guys continue to stick around even though the Rebel 500 is gone and all the bikes of previous past of this channel. I am hoping that this bike is going to stick around for quite some time. And as of right now, in about the almost 1 month that I've had it, I think that it's going to. So stay tuned and I'll see you guys in the next video.